Hello everyone, and welcome to my video contribution for the Festive Tech Calendar 2020, a great community initiative set up by Gregor Suti and Richard Hooper. It's all about sharing knowledge and helping people to learn new things and improve their skill sets throughout the festive month of December. This is truly by the communities, for the communities. And with this video, I want to give you some advice and help on how you can get your Azure Backup implementation under control. I hope you enjoy it and that you can apply some of the tips and features in your own Azure environment. Let me first share a little bit about myself. My name is Wim Matthyssen. I live in Belgium where I work as a cloud architect. Next to that, I'm also a Microsoft certified trainer, so also deliver all kinds of Azure trainings. Community-wise, I'm a founding board member of a Belgian user group called MC2MC, and I also have my own blog, https://wimmatthyssen.com, where I blog a lot about my daily experience with Azure and all related Microsoft hybrid cloud services. Since July of this year, I'm also awarded as a Microsoft Azure MVP, what a great honor was and still is. And like most IT professionals these days, I'm also on Twitter and LinkedIn. So if you ever want to reach out or just want to say hi or ask a question about Azure Backup, you can always contact me through my Twitter handle @Wim or through LinkedIn. In this video, first of all, I will explain why it's that important to get and to keep in control of your Azure Backup implementation. I will then not only look into Azure governance and the security part, but also how you can monitor your Azure Backup workloads using the Azure Portal, Azure Monitor, and Azure Backup Explorer. And of course, like most of you will know, there's no monitoring without alerting. So I will also take a deeper look at all alerting capabilities. At the end, I will also look into how you can configure reporting and explain how it can help you to get insights on your backups across your entire backup estate. So sit back and let us get started. The first question we can ask ourselves is why? Well, probably like most of you know, there are different cloud service models. Depending on which cloud service model you run your workloads, is it IaaS, PaaS, serverless, or SaaS, there will always be some degree of shared responsibility, where Microsoft will manage everything till a certain point, but you as a customer also have some responsibility, like for example foreseeing backups for IaaS workloads. And it's really difficult to foresee a good backup or a good backup strategy if you're not completely in control of your Azure Backup implementation. You need to secure it, govern it, and monitor it, just like you need to do for all your Azure environments and other cloud resources. So let us first take a look on how you can foresee governance and security for Azure Backup. When a proper Azure governance and security strategy is followed for your Azure Backup implementation, you can really ensure that your teams are operating in a compliant environment, and this during design, development, and operations. And in this way, you can also minimize operational and reputational risk, and this from a security perspective. And it all starts with a good naming convention for your Azure Backup resources. First of all, you have the recovery services vault, the storage entity that houses your backup data. You can see some examples of my preferred naming convention on the slide. I mostly use RSV, then a 3-letter abbreviation for the customer, then I define the spoke, and finally a number. Next to that, you should really keep in mind that the Azure Backup Service also creates a separate resource group to store the resource point collection objects. By default, the format will be Azure Backup RG, geolocation, and a number. So if you want to use your own naming convention, you need to specify the name in advance before enabling any backup. You can do this via Azure PowerShell or when you create a new backup policy in the Azure portal. Also use a good naming convention for your backup policies, so it's clear to everyone for which type of backup the policy is used. Is it for VMs or for an Azure file share? You can see a list of some examples I use on the slide. Then of course you can also use Azure resource tags. Resource tags provide you with a way to apply additional metadata on your cloud resources to include information that could or should not be included in the resource name. They can also help you to remain in control of your cloud environment and your backup environment and assist you in logically organizing all your resources, and this with properties that you define. A good tag to use for backups is when, for example, you want to specify that a certain resource doesn't need a backup. Then you, for example, can add a no backup tag. Or you can also specify the policy used for a resource in the tag. That's also a good idea, and I do it sometimes. Look out with resource lock in combination with Azure Backup resources. Although they are a good way to prevent unexpected changes or modifications, or even worse, accidental deletion of resources, they really can cause backups to fail when you, for example, put a cannot delete lock on the resource group created by the Azure Backup service. When you set up a good Azure governance structure, you can't forget to use Azure Policy. These days, Azure Policy provides some built-in policies you can use in combination with Azure Backup. For example, you can enable a policy to auto-enable backup on VM creation, or you can apply one that configures backup on VMs with a given tag. Remember the no backup tag. And this on an existing recovery services vault, of course, in the same region of where your VM is hosted. Cost management is also an important part of a good governance strategy. And luckily, there are several ways you can optimize your Azure Backup costs. First of all, you can use the Azure Backup pricing estimator, which can help you to get an idea of the cost savings you can achieve by, for example, switching to a differential backup. There are also some design and deployment decisions concerning the vault that can have an impact on your backup costs. You can use a single vault or multiple vaults to organize and manage your backups. If your workloads are all managed by a single subscription and a single resource, then you can best use a single vault to monitor and manage your backups. But in the case you're working with different type of workloads in a hub-spoke model in the same subscription, or if your workloads are spread across subscriptions, it is best to create more vaults in each subscription. Next to that, when you create a new recovery services vault, by default, the GRS replication setting is applied to that vault. While this is a recommended storage replication option for production workloads, you can choose to protect your dev test workloads using LRS. You can then also set up two different vaults, one for production workloads with GRS enabled, and the other for dev test workloads with LRS enabled. You can also optimize your backup policies and retentions with, for example, the use of shorter retention durations, and which can also have an impact on your costs. If you're backing up resources that do not exist anymore, you can verify if you still need to retain all backups for these resources and otherwise clean them up. Because deleting those unnecessary backups will also help you save money on your backup costs. Also, take a look at your IaaS VMs. Probably for some of those VMs, you might only require the protection of certain VM data disks and not the entire VM. These days, with the selective disk backup feature, you can now exclude or include certain data disks for being backed up. And by this, you can also lower your backup costs. There are also some security features you can apply to better protect and secure your Azure Backup implementation. First of all, you can use role-based access control, RBAC, to control who has access to your vaults, what they can do with it, and what areas they have access to. There are some built-in roles you can use. You have the backup contributor, the backup operator, and the backup reader role. So try to apply the correct one to, for example, your IT team or other people who need to be able to access your backups. By default, the data in the recovery services vault is encrypted using platform managed keys managed by Microsoft, but you can also choose to bring your own key to encrypt the backup data in the recovery services vault. You should also enable soft delete, which is enabled by default to protect your backup data from unintentional or malicious deletes. And you can also use Azure Private Endpoints. For who does not know, an Azure Private Endpoint is a network interface that connects you privately and securely to a service provided by Azure Private Link. Private endpoints can be used for backing up and restoring your SQL and SAP HANA databases that run inside your VMs, but it can also be used for your on-premise service using the Mars agent. So now it's time for the first demo. So let me open my Azure portal. So here we are in my Azure portal. So let me first open the recovery service vault blade. You can see at the moment I have 3 vaults. You can also see my use naming convention. Like I already said in the presentation, I mostly use RSV, followed by the customer abbreviation, the spoke, and then a number. You can also see that I have 2 vaults in the location West Europe and 1 vault in the East US location. And you can see I also have some tags applied, like for example, business critically to critical. If you click on the first vault and we look at the backup items, you can see I have some SQL databases backed up running in an Azure VM. I have some Azure virtual machines backed up and also an Azure file share. Because I now already have some items backed up, if we go to the properties and we go to the backup configuration, you can see I can't switch the storage replication type. If we go to another vault, for example the third one, and we look at the backup items, you can see I have no items that are backup at the moment by default. So if I now go into the properties, once again, click on backup configuration. You can see I can switch between LRS and GRS, and I can also enable or disable the cross-region restore. So that's an important thing you should keep in mind. As long as there are no items backed up by default, you can still switch the storage replication type. Let me close this one. If you look at the encryption settings, you can see at the moment I use a platform managed key. If I want to use my own key, I just select it, enter the key area, and save it. So let me close this one again. Okay, it's not a good way to close, but it does for a demo purpose. Let me look at the security settings. You can see that soft delete is enabled by default, even if you create a new recovery services vault. I can disable it. A lot of the standard security features are enabled by default. You can all read about them at the bottom. You can also say that you're using MFA. You can save it. Let me close this one. If we then look at the first vault, because I already have some items backed up, I'm not able to create a private endpoint. I can still create a system managed identity for this vault, but I can't set up a private endpoint because it's already backing up things. But if we look at the third vault, which has no backup items at the moment, you can see I can create a system managed identity. I gave that specific identity the Azure Backup the contributor role, and you can see I was able to set up a private endpoint. You can see I also don't put any lock on my recovery services vault, otherwise it's possible that backups will fail. Like I already said, the Azure Backup service creates a specific recovery service vault which holds snapshots. If you want to use your own naming convention, you can do so also through the Azure portal. Just click on backup policies. Let me go back to my first vault. You can see I already have some policies in place. I have one specific for the file shares, I have one for SQL Server running in Azure VMs, and I have one for Azure virtual machines. Also, look at the name I'm using. It almost specifies for which type of resource the policy is used. If I click on this one, click on modify, I can scroll down completely to the bottom. And you can see over here, I'm able to give that specific resource group my own naming convention in use. You also need to do it before you back up any item with this policy. Of course, you can also do it through Azure PowerShell. One last thing I want to show you in this demo is the policies. So let me open the policy blade. You can see I have a specific policy in place which says that I should enable that Azure Backup should be enabled on Azure virtual machines. And you can see my compliance state at the moment. Every virtual machine I'm running is compliant and has Azure Backup enabled. So that's it for this demo. So let me go back to the slides. Let us now look into the monitoring and alerting part of Azure Backup. Azure Backup provides inbuilt monitoring and alerting capabilities for workloads being protected by Azure Backup. First of all, you have backup jobs. Jobs are generated when operations such as configuring backup, restores, or delete backup are performed. You can see jobs for Azure EAS VM backups, Azure File backups, Azure Workload backups such as for SQL and SAP HANA, and also for backup jobs performed by a Mars agent. You can also look at Azure Backup alerts. You can see critical and warning alerts. An example of an alert can be when a backup or a restore fails or when backup protection is stopped. Just keep in mind that there are exceptions in which an alert will not be raised, like for example when a user explicitly cancels a backup job. You can also configure notification for backup alerts so that a user can get notified when an alert is raised via, for example, an email. There are also other types of alerting you can use. When something, for example, is wrong with a backup, you can check the activity log, which is a log that offers you insights into operations or resources in your subscription. Here you can find, for example, when a backup is taken, or you can see whenever someone deleted backup data. A great free service which will notify if there are issues with your Azure Backup service is Azure Service Health. It will inform you if problems in the Azure backbone are causing issues with your Azure Backup service. It will tell you how Microsoft is treating the issue and when and how it's getting resolved. Another great free service you can use is Azure Advisor. It will give you best practice recommendations about all your Azure resources. But in the case of Azure Backup, for example, it can advise you to enable Azure Backup on a specific Azure EAS VM where no backup is configured. You can also monitor Azure Backup using Azure Monitor and Log Analytics. This allows you to monitor key backup parameters across recovery services, vault, and subscriptions. It will not only cover workloads including Azure VMs, SQL in Azure VM backups, but also System Center Data Protection Manager backups connected to Azure and file folder backups from Mars agents. To set it up, you will need a Log Analytics workspace. Best is to choose one workspace for all your recovery services faults. Just keep in mind that it can take up to 24 hours for the initial data push is complete. And when configured, you will be able to monitor all backups and restores and look at all data sources. You can also monitor all Azure Backup alerts, but you need to select a relevant time range to monitor, such as the proper start and stop times. And when configured, you're also able to generate custom alerts. These days, you can also monitor your backups with Backup Explorer. Backup Explorer is a built-in Azure Monitor workbook that gives you a single central monitoring location. It will help you to monitor operational activities across your entire Azure Backup estate. It can foresee these cross-tenant views via the use of Azure Lighthouse. So it can span tenants, locations, subscriptions, resource groups, and vaults. For the moment, it can only be used to monitor Azure EAS VM's backup data, and the operational dashboard only shows information from the last 7 days. But let us take a look at those things in the next demo. For our first demo, let us first look at the built-in monitoring and alerting capabilities. So let us open a recovery services vault. Let us take the first one and scroll down to the monitoring section. Here you can click on, for example, backup jobs. And on this blade you can see all backup operations, like for example the completed backups. You can go through them, or you can even filter them. And if you need to send them to someone through email, you can even export those jobs, and then they will be saved to an XS format. In the monitoring section you can also open backup alerts. At the moment I have no alerts configured for the specific filter, so let me open the filter and let me maybe go back a little bit. Let's select the 6th. So you can see in that time window I had some backup alerts raised. If you click on one, you can see I had a problem with backing up a SQL database inside an Azure VM. If you don't want to see those alerts anymore, for example, you can simply inactivate them, but let us, for the purpose of the demo, just close them. You can also configure notifications over here. It's only email notifications, so let us switch the slider to on. Just type in an email address or a group you want to use. You can be notified per alert or in an hourly digit. If you choose an hourly digit, all alerts being raised within the hour will be sent to you through email. You can also choose severity. You can choose critical and warning and information. Although you can select the information one, at the moment no information alerts are being generated by the Azure Backup service. So I always choose critical and warning. Then just click on save and that's configured. You can also monitor your Azure Backup setup with Azure Monitor and a Log Analytics workspace. So let us go to my Log Analytics workspace first. Oh. That's better. Let's just open it. Why would you use that instead of the built-in monitoring and alerting capabilities? You use it, for example, when your preferred notification channel is not email, or if you want to alert being raised for more scenarios than just the built-in ones. If you want to use it from over here, just in your Log Analytics workspace, go to Logs, click on it, and then you can simply type in some QSO query language queries to validate or run some monitoring on your Azure Backup environment. There are a lot of queries available on internet, and there are also a lot of people writing them in their making them in their GitHub pages. So you can, if you want to build a new one, it's easy to look them up than write them yourself. For purpose of the demo, I already created one in front. So if you click on this one, it will go to all complete. It will list all completed backup just from the last 24 hours. I can simply change one if I want to list all failed backups from the last 24 hours. I can click run again. And luckily for me, there were no problems in the last 24 hours. You can also create, from every query you write, you can also create an alert. In the back, you fill in an Azure Monitor action group, and then with your preferred setting, how you want to receive the alert. So this is a way how you can combine Log Analytics and Azure Monitor to monitor your Azure backup estate. These days you can also use Azure Backup Explorer. So let us go back to our recovery services vault. Let me simply select it, or maybe type it in the global search bar. It's another way to go through them. Click the first one again. If you go to the overview and then just click on Backup Explorer. Backups Explorer displays multiple tabs, each providing detailed information about a specific backup artifact. For example, you can show backup items, jobs, alerts and policies, but let us click on Backup Not Enabled. This section shows you all VMs. Currently it's in preview and it only works for Azure IaaS VMs. All VMs where no backup is being configured, so it's an easy way to find those. The last thing I want to show you in this demo, how you can connect a Log Analytics workspace to gather all data generated by Azure Backup. Simply scroll down back to the Azure monitoring section, but maybe let me do it on a clean vault with no backup items. So scroll back, once again go to the monitoring section, just click on diagnostic settings. You can see at the moment no diagnostic settings are defined. Just click on that to create one. Type in a name, festive tech calendar, dive for example. Then select all of these, everything related to Azure Backup. You don't need to select the first one, the Azure Backup report, because that's not being used anymore. So you don't need to select it. Also select this one. And then you simply choose send to the data to a log analytics workspace. Select the right subscription, select your log analytics workspace, and then the destination tab, just leave it as it is, and just simply click on save. And now all report data will be backup data, and actions on the backup data and on backups will be, all the data will be gathered in a log analytics workspace. So that's it for this demo. Let us go back to the slides. As a final topic, I also want to talk a little bit about the reporting capabilities of Azure Backup. A common requirement for backup admins these days is to obtain insights in backups based on data that spans a long period of time. For example, they need to be able to not only allocate but also forecast the consumed cloud storage, or they need to be able to audit backups and restores. Luckily for them, Azure Backup provides a reporting solution that uses Azure Monitor logs and Azure Monitor workbooks. Those workbooks can create visual reports within the Azure portal and can help them analyzing their backup data so they can get the right insights in all their cloud backups. Keep in mind that you also require a log analytics workspace to store your backup reporting data, and this data can be viewed in backup reports across a maximum of 100 log analytics workspaces. And if you're using Azure Lighthouse, you can use and view backup reports across all your customer subscriptions. But let us go back to the Azure portal so I can show it in a short demo. So in this last demo, I want to show you how you can use Azure Backup reports. You already know how you can connect a log analytics workspace to your Azure Backup environment, so I don't need to do that again. So we can simply open a recovery service vault. Let us take the first one. You go to the Overview tab and then scroll down, and you can see Backup Reports. Just click on it. On this page, just select your log analytics workspace. It's this one. Just open it, and then you can see different tabs. First of all, you have the Summary tab, which will give you a high-level overview of your backup estate. Then you also have backup items, where you can see information and trends on cloud storage consumed at the backup item level. Then you have the Usage tab to view key billing parameters for your backups. You also have the Jobs tab, which allows you to see long-running trends on jobs, such as the number of failed jobs per day and the top causes of job failures, for example. Then you also have the Policies tab to view information on all your active policies. And then the last one is the Optimize tab, which will gain visibility into potential cost optimization opportunities for your backups. So let us open that one, for example. It will gather information from the last 7 days. And for example, I have two options. For example, if I click on the inactive resources, it will give me some potential savings I can do. For example, probably this VM doesn't run anymore, but is still backed. So I can take a look into it a little bit deeper if I still need to retain the backups, or I can completely delete them. So that's it for this demo. So let us go back to the slides. So that's it. Thank you for your attention. I really hope you learned something from this video. Be sure to check out all other videos, blog posts and other contributions at https://festivetechcalendar.com and on the Festive Tech YouTube channel, because there will be a lot of other interesting Microsoft topics covered and delivered by different communities and people from around the world. You can also keep an eye on Twitter for the hashtags FestiveTechCalendar and Cloud Family, and don't forget to tweet about it yourself. And if you ever have a question related to Azure Backup, you can always contact me through my Twitter handle @Wim Matthyssen. And before saying goodbye, we still have a special message from Belgium.
Ho!
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 Thanks for attending, everyone. We hope you enjoyed our sessions. Greetings from Belgium, from Wim, Karel, and Tim.
We all wish you and your family peace, health, happiness, and prosperity in the coming year.
And we hope you have a safe and relaxing holiday season. So Merry Christmas and a Happy New Year to all of you. Bye.
Bye.
Bye.